They laughed like it was nothing. But for Josiah, every joke landed like a quiet prophecy he wasn't ready to face. The apartment was warm with life. Soft gospel music drifting through the air, the low clink of plates, the easy comfort of friendship. Beyond the wide glass windows, the city stretched endlessly, alive with movement and light. Four men sat around the table, settled, confident, each one carrying the quiet evidence of a life already shared with someone else. And then there was Josiah. Josiah sat relaxed on the outside, a faint smile resting on his lips, but his eyes told a quieter story. At 34, he was everything people respected: disciplined, devoted, spiritually grounded, a pastor with influence, a man known for integrity, and yet he was the only one at the table without a wife. "Let's be honest," one of them said, leaning back with a grin. "Josiah, what exactly are you waiting for? A handwritten letter from heaven?" Laughter rippled across the table. Another pointed his fork at him. "You're a pastor. Do you know how many women are praying dangerous prayers about you?" More laughter followed. "Bro, you're tall, dark, and, annoyingly, handsome. This is not normal behavior." Josiah chuckled, shaking his head lightly. "I'm just waiting on God." "Ah," one of them clapped. "Classic. Waiting on God. Meanwhile, God is waiting on you to make a move." The jokes kept coming, easy and familiar, until one of his closest friends leaned forward, his voice dropping just enough to shift the air. "Guy, you're officially the last man standing." A brief pause, then with a grin, "The only single Pringle." The table erupted. Josiah laughed too, this time genuinely, but it didn't last. As the laughter faded, the room seemed to settle into something quieter, heavier. One of them spoke again, more measured now. "Jokes aside," no one interrupted. "Loneliness is real, bro." Another nodded. "And temptation doesn't send a warning email before it shows up." The words lingered. "You don't need perfection," someone added. "You need partnership." He nodded slowly, but his mind had already drifted. He had heard it all before. The encouragement, the warnings, the concern carefully wrapped in humor. And maybe, just maybe, they weren't entirely wrong. Someone lifted a glass. "To Josiah, may he finally find a wife before we organize a search party." Laughter returned, lighter this time. Glasses clinked. Josiah smiled again. But this time it didn't quite reach his eyes. The attention didn't come all at once. It settled around Josiah slowly, like a quiet reality he could no longer ignore. It was in the way conversations lingered longer than necessary, in the extra smiles, in the careful, almost intentional presence of certain faces wherever he turned. Being a pastor came with visibility. Being a single one came with something else: expectation. After service one Sunday, he stepped out into the hallway, still exchanging greetings when she approached him. The kind of confidence that didn't ask for permission. "You preached well today," she said, her tone warm but layered. Josiah nodded politely. "Thank you." She didn't move. "I mean it," she continued, holding his gaze a second longer than necessary. "Not just the message. You carry something." There was nothing overtly wrong in her words, but something in the delivery felt misplaced. "I appreciate that," he replied gently, already stepping aside. She smiled, slow and knowing, before finally letting him go. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. Then there were the quieter gestures. It started with a neatly wrapped box left on his office desk. No name, just a small note tucked inside. "Praying for you, Pastor." He frowned slightly, turning the card over, but there was nothing else. The next week it happened again. Different gift, same handwriting. "God strengthen you always." He asked around, but no one seemed to know anything. Or perhaps no one wanted to say. And then there were the ones who never came close at all. She stood at the back most Sundays, never drawing attention to herself. Not loud, not forward, just present. He had noticed her, though he couldn't say exactly when. Maybe it was the way she listened, fully without distraction, or the way she lingered after service, not to speak, but to observe. Their eyes had met once. She looked away almost immediately, no smiles, no signals, no effort to be seen. And yet, Something about her felt steady, real. Josiah remained who he had always been, guarded, disciplined, unmoved in his convictions. He didn't entertain flirtation. He didn't encourage attention. He didn't respond to what didn't align. But he was not unaware. He noticed. He understood what was happening around him. The interest, the options, the subtle pull of being wanted. And somewhere beneath his discipline, there was a quiet, human awareness of it all. Not temptation, not compromise, just the undeniable reality that he was no longer just waiting, he was being watched. Grace was not the kind of woman people noticed immediately. She didn't command attention when she walked into a room. She didn't try to be seen. And yet, over time, people began to recognize something about her that didn't need announcement. She was steady. There was a quiet order to her life, a consistency that showed in the way she served, the way she spoke, even in the way she listened. She didn't rush conversations. She didn't interrupt. And when she spoke, it carried weight. Not volume, not performance, just truth. She was the kind of woman older members respected without discussion, the kind younger women watched without realizing they were learning. Grace was grounded but not loud, and somehow that made her easy to overlook. Josiah had noticed her. Of course he had. A man like him didn't miss substance. He recognized discipline when he saw it. He saw how she carried herself, how she never competed for attention, how her life quietly aligned with everything he preached. Even Pa Isaac had mentioned her once in passing. Not directly, not forcefully. Just a simple statement, she's a good woman. That was all. But coming from him, it meant something. Still, Josiah couldn't see it, not in the way others seemed to. There was no pull, no spark, no emotional stirring that made him pause. If anything, something about her made him uncomfortable. He couldn't quite explain it. She's too perfect, he admitted once, half joking, half serious. I'll always feel judged around her. His friends burst out laughing. Judged or exposed? One of them shot back. Josiah rolled his eyes. You people won't understand. Another leaned forward, studying him. So, what's the issue then? He hesitated briefly before shrugging. She's not really my spec. That earned him a louder reaction. Ah, there it is. This guy wants a model, not a wife. Laughter filled the room again. Josiah shook his head quickly. That's not it. But even he knew that wasn't entirely true. In his mind, he had already painted a picture. Someone lighter, softer in appearance. Someone he could carry, laugh with, feel at ease around. And beyond that, he wanted presence. Not just spirituality, but something visible, tangible. Someone people could look at and immediately say, yes, she carries something. Grace didn't seem like that to him. She was calm, reserved, almost too composed. Not firebrand, not expressive, not what he imagined standing beside him in ministry. She doesn't even look anointed, he said once, quieter this time, almost to himself. But what he called lack was actually depth. What he saw as too quiet was actually strength. What he dismissed as not his spec was discernment trying to get his attention. Grace never chased, never positioned herself, never tried to be chosen. She simply remained who she was. And slowly, quietly, Josiah overlooked her. What he didn't realize was this. He wasn't rejecting her because she lacked anything. He was rejecting her because she didn't match the picture he had created. And sometimes what God sends doesn't come with excitement. It comes with peace. But peace to a restless heart can feel like nothing at all. Josiah was not a bad man. If anything, he was the kind of man people trusted easily. Patient, gentle, principled. The type who showed up when it mattered, who listened more than he spoke, who carried responsibility without needing applause. Even his struggles were quiet. So when it came to marriage, he didn't treat it lightly. That night, long after the noise of the day had settled, Josiah sat alone with his Bible open in front of him. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp that cast soft shadows across the pages. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his palms together before bowing his head. Lord, guide me. It wasn't a dramatic prayer, no raised voice, no urgency, just sincerity. For a moment there was stillness, the kind he was used to, the kind he trusted. But then his thoughts began to move. Quietly at first, then faster. Grace came to mind, her calmness, her steadiness, her quiet strength. Then almost immediately, a comparison. She's good, but is she the one? Another thought followed. What if there's someone better suited for me? Then preference slipped in, almost unnoticed. I want someone I'm naturally drawn to, someone who fits me, and somewhere beneath it all, ego. People will expect a certain kind of person beside me. Josiah shifted slightly, lifting his head, unaware of how far his thoughts had already drifted from the place he started. He meant to pray, but now he was reasoning. The line between seeking God and consulting himself had become thin, almost invisible. He flipped through his Bible absent-mindedly, his eyes landing on familiar scriptures. Words he had preached, words he knew. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. He paused there, but instead of surrendering, he analyzed. What does trusting look like in this situation? What if I'm overthinking? What if I'm just being wise? The questions sounded spiritual, but they were no longer coming from stillness. They were coming from noise. Outside voices echoed in his mind now. His friends' laughter, their warnings, their subtle concern. You're not getting younger. You need a partner. You're being too selective. And slowly, without realizing it, Josiah began to blend things that were never meant to mix. God's will, his personal desires, and the pressure around him. It didn't feel like rebellion. That was the thing. It felt reasonable, balanced, even wise. But somewhere deep within, where clarity once lived, something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to blur the difference between what God was saying and what he wanted to hear. Josiah closed his Bible gently, leaning back in his chair. I'll keep praying about it, he whispered. But even that prayer was no longer as clear as it used to be. And in that quiet room, with no one else around, Josiah didn't realize that the answer he was waiting for had already been competing with his own voice. Ella didn't arrive quietly. She didn't blend into the background or wait to be noticed. There was a presence about her, confident, composed, intentional. The kind of presence that drew attention without asking for it. The first time Josiah saw her, it wasn't during service, it was after. She stood just outside the main hall, speaking with someone, her posture relaxed, her smile easy. There was something about the way she carried herself, assured, expressive, alive, not loud but visible. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. Instead, she smiled, not shy, not hesitant, certain. Pastor Josiah, she said when she finally approached him, her voice warm but steady. That message, it felt like it was for me. He nodded politely. I'm glad it spoke to you. It did more than that, she replied. It confirmed something I've been praying about. There it was again, that confidence. Not the quiet, grounded kind he had seen before. This was different. It was engaging. Her name was Ella, and everything about her seemed to align with what Josiah had imagined without ever admitting out loud. She was expressive in worship, well put together, spiritually vocal, comfortable being seen. She didn't just carry faith, she displayed it. Where Grace was calm, Ella was vibrant. Where Grace was quiet, Ella was visible. Where Grace felt steady, Ella felt alive. And for the first time in a long while, Josiah felt something shift. It started subtly, a thought here, a curiosity there, then attention, then interest. Finally, something in him whispered, someone who fits. The conversations came easily, too easily. She asked questions that made him feel seen, spoke words that sounded aligned, listened in a way that felt intentional. And slowly, without force, Josiah began to lean in. This time, when he prayed, it was different. Lord, what do you think about Ella? But even in that question, there was already a direction. He wasn't asking from a place of surrender anymore. He was asking from a place of hope. Hope that this feeling, this connection, this alignment was finally it. And then came the dream. It felt real, too real. He saw himself standing beside her. Ella, dressed in white, smiling, radiant. The atmosphere was filled with light, a sense of completion wrapping around the moment. It felt peaceful. It felt right. It felt like confirmation. Josiah woke up with his heart full, certain. God has spoken. But what he didn't pause to question was this. The dream had not brought new clarity. It had simply reflected what his heart had already begun to believe. It wasn't discernment, it was desire, wearing the voice of certainty. And because it looked right, felt right, and came at the exact moment he was tired of waiting, Josiah accepted it, without testing it, without waiting, without going back to the quiet place where God had once spoken clearly. To him, it was answered prayer, but in truth, it was the echo of his own expectations, finally taking form. What should have unfolded slowly, didn't. With Ella, everything moved forward, quickly, naturally, almost effortlessly. Conversations deepened within days. Familiarity settled in without permission. It felt less like something being built, and more like something already decided. She was present, always. If he had a meeting, she checked in. If he mentioned something in passing, she remembered. If he pulled back slightly, she leaned in just enough to close the distance. To Josiah, it felt like care. Intentional, attentive, rare. You don't have to do life alone anymore, she said one evening, her voice soft but certain. God didn't design you to carry everything by yourself. It sounded right. It felt right. And slowly he began to let her in. Not just into his time, but into his space, his decisions, his rhythm. She spoke often about purpose, about alignment, about how she had prayed for a man like him. I see where you're going, she told him once, her eyes steady on his. And I know I'm meant to be part of it. There was no hesitation in her voice, no doubt. Just conviction. Josiah didn't question it. Not deeply, because everything she said seemed to confirm what he had already begun to believe. But not everyone felt the same. It started subtly. A glance exchanged across the table. A pause that lasted just a second too long. A tone that shifted ever so slightly. His friends noticed. She's intense, one of them said casually after she left the room. Josiah looked up. Intense how? The friend shrugged. I don't know. Just a lot. Very fast. Another added, half joking, but not entirely. Everything about this feels like it's on speed. Josiah let out a small laugh. You people are not used to someone who knows what she wants. A third friend leaned back, studying him more carefully. Are you sure she likes you? He paused, choosing his words. Or what comes with you? That one lingered, but only briefly. Josiah shook his head. You're overthinking it. She's just expressive. He hesitated, then added, at least she's not cold. He didn't mention Grace, but the comparison sat quietly in the room. The conversations didn't stop him. If anything, they made him more certain, because now defending Ella felt like defending his decision. And then there were the moments he kept to himself. Small things, easy to dismiss. The way her tone changed when he didn't respond quickly enough. The way she subtly questioned other women around him. The way her emotions seemed to rise sharply, then settle just as quickly, often followed by an apology wrapped in affection. I just care about you, she would say, and somehow that made everything feel justified. Josiah noticed, but he explained, nobody is perfect. Maybe she's just passionate. At least she loves God, discernment whispered, but reasoning spoke louder. It wasn't until Pa Isaac came around that the atmosphere shifted again. He didn't say much at first. He observed, watched the interactions, listened more than he spoke. And then one evening, when it was just the two of them, he spoke. She's eager, Pa Isaac said calmly. Josiah nodded, a small smile forming. She's intentional. Pa Isaac looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, not everything that is eager is ready. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Josiah leaned back slightly. Sir, I've prayed about this. I know, Pa Isaac replied gently. A pause. Have you listened, or have you decided? That question didn't sit well. With all due respect, Josiah said carefully, I believe God has given me peace about her. Pa Isaac didn't argue. He simply nodded, but his silence said more than words could. That night, Josiah returned home with thoughts he didn't want to sit with. So he didn't. Instead, he leaned into what felt easier, clearer, certain. Ella, the conversations, the alignment, the dream. Why wait, he thought to himself. God already confirmed it. She fits. And just like that, what should have been tested became trusted. The warning signs were not absent. They were simply explained away. And somewhere in the quiet space where God once spoke clearly, there was now a mixture. Not loud enough to alarm him, not strong enough to stop him, but just enough to lead him forward without question. For the first time in a long time, Josiah felt sure, and that was what made it dangerous. And just like that, it was settled. Not with a thunderous confirmation from heaven, not with undeniable clarity, but with a quiet confidence Josiah chose to trust. Everything seemed to align. The timing, the connection, the dream, the feeling that after years of waiting, this was finally it. But beneath the certainty, buried under desire, pressure, and carefully explained red flags, was a silence he no longer paid attention to. The kind of silence that doesn't argue, the kind that simply withdraws. He had prayed, he had thought it through, he had defended it, and now he was ready to move forward, fully convinced, completely sure, unaware that not every open door is sent by God, and not every peace we feel is truly from Him, because sometimes what we call confirmation is just our desires, finally agreeing with our decisions. And by the time the truth reveals itself, you're no longer choosing, you're already committed. If this story stirred something in you, don't ignore it. Like, share, and subscribe. Because part 2 is where everything changes.